Hey, listeners, this is Mike Morford of The Murder My Family, and I want to invite you to listen to this special episode. It's a collaboration or crossover episode with some friends of the show, John Lordan of Lordan Arts, and Tim Polari and Lance Reensterna from Crawlspace Media. We got together to discuss a perplexing series of deaths that have recently happened in the New England region, and it has everyone asking the question, is there a serial killer in New England? Between John, Tim, Lance, and myself, we've probably covered thousands of cases of all types, so we were all happy to sit down together and dive into these New England cases to see if we can make sense of what's happening there. We approach it from various angles using our past experiences and seeing what conclusions we can come to. This episode is a deep dive into the facts and theories in the case. We explore what we know and still don't know to this point. Hope you enjoy this special crossover episode, and I'll see you back here soon.
So I think at this point, it's a good time to bring on my guests for this kind of true crime roundtable that we're going to do on this topic here today. We've got Tim and Lance that are joining us, as well as my good buddy from 3 Men and a Mystery, Mike Morford. So let's go ahead and bring everyone to the show here. What's up, Tim?
Hey, John.
Hey.
How are you?
Hey, everyone.
Good. Hey, Morph. Good to see you again.
Like always.
And can we get a hello from Lance so we can see Lance?
You sure can. Hello, John. Thank you for having us on.
Of course, guys. So I know we've got a ton of information to go through, but is there anything that you want to start with before we dive into these individual instances? Are any of you on the fence about this? Do you think there could be something to this? Where are you guys with this serial killer theory?
I just want to start by saying you did such a great job recapping off the top there, just giving people an idea of what we're about to talk about, especially giving them a sense of like the surroundings, the area there, and making sure that people remember that this isn't the plot to a new Scream movie. This is like lives that we're talking about who have family members attached to them. And the purpose of us doing this here is to go through as many details as possible to try to make some sense of why these clusters are happening. But anyway, yeah, that's what I just wanted to start with by thanking you for doing that.
Yeah, of course. Tim?
Yeah, we've been covering this story a little bit from sort of a wide view, trying to discuss I guess this moment in time online, because this story has really gotten gas from social media and essentially nowhere else. Like, no one in law enforcement is talking about this being a serial killer. In fact, they're saying the opposite. But it's not something we can completely ignore, I feel like, because, well, we live in New England. We're getting texts from like personal, friends who, I don't even know if they listen to our shows, but they're like texting us, and it's like, hey, you guys following this? So I think it's of major public interest across the country, but especially over here. At this point, I would say there's no reason to believe there is a serial killer responsible for most of these bodies. But I also don't think there's enough information to say there definitely isn't. And then when you break down each story, I actually do think there could be a serial killer or even two that is involved in this whole story, but certainly not responsible for all of these deaths.
I'll be interested to see what cases you think are connected, because honestly, when looking through this, there's a pair of them that are kind of sticking out to me as well as possibly being connected. Of course, someone that's very familiar with connections like this, Morph, when you were looking into the Golden State Killer, did you find that there were other murders that were being attached to that did not turn out to be accurate?
Yeah, sort of after the fact. I mean, early on, before the case was solved, there were people that said, hey, maybe this case is connected, check into it. And, later on, I think after D'Angelo was arrested, they seemed to think that most of those cases were not connected to him or didn't have physical evidence. And, after all these years now, he's been in prison for 5-6 years. There hasn't been any cases connected to him outside of the ones he was, sent to prison for. But I think it just goes to show you that when people start thinking about cases with similarities or in a general area, they start lumping them together for better or for worse. Now, my personal feeling is And we covered this case on Criminology a few weeks back, and I remember responding to a couple listener comments and questions. They were all over the place. The people I was responding with, some thought it was a serial killer. Some people said nothing to see here. Some people thought there was a combination of things going on. So I'm sort of on the fence as to what's going on here. I think, in some of these cases, we actually have some answers. We know what happened in some of these cases. In some of them, we don't even know the cause of death in every case. And then there are other ones that are clear cut, cases of murder. And, it's a question to see, what links them, if anything.
One of the first things that came up when I spoke to Tim and Lance about this, I was wondering about any connectivity, or even if this was just a new spin on something we had heard about before, the Connecticut River Valley Killer. Can you guys tell us a little bit about that and how this is not that instance?
Sure. I mean, a lot of time has elapsed since the last recorded or alleged Connecticut River serial killer attack happened, and that was in 1987. That was Jane Borofsky, and she survived. And prior to that, those killings, the series of murders took place in the mid to late from 77, 78 to the latest one that was, about 10 years later. So that was the area time-wise where this occurred. Also geographically, even though it's still in New England, the ones that are happening now seem to be, aside from the Springfield, Massachusetts, those two in Springfield, Massachusetts, it's more southeastern. And yeah, there you go. So the map right there, you're looking at southeastern New England, whereas the attacks from the original Connecticut River Valley killings, that was about halfway up the Vermont, New Hampshire border in an area that was the Connecticut River Valley region, separated by the Connecticut River. So if you were to drive straight up, or as the crow flies, as they say, a few hours, a couple of hours, 2.5 hours or so. So not super close to where these are taking place.
Gotcha. Tim, can you give us a little insight into this area? I mean, it's hard when we're just looking at it from a map. I've never quite been to this area before, but this cluster, it obviously it's been grouped, right? Because we've got this theory that is grouping the region. But is this, I mean, we're talking several states. Is this something where we think it could be a truck driver, or do you have any thoughts on how the geography of this are speaking to us?
Well, we spoke with Michael Arntfield, who is, I believe, the director of the Murder Accountability Project, and he did let us in on some knowledge about the geography. So the where the bodies were found, that cluster is not too large of a cluster to be considered victims of a serial killer. But I really don't see much connection to these murders, especially the ones that are further away. Now, the ones closer to each other, I think that's worthy of a closer look, especially the Springfield ones.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't know. I think MO and other factors sort of take us away from this being anything really similar other than the region of New England, which is small when you're looking at the map of the entire country, but large when you're here and driving around. It takes a few hours maybe to get to between some of these locations. So I don't know. It's a tough one. I don't really think there are any major highways that connect these points or anything like that. I don't think we're looking at a long haul trucker or anything like that.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and start talking about them case by case here. So, Crawlspace team, if you want to take us through the first two, and then we'll have Morph take the third one.
Sure. Yeah, so on March 6th, 2025, the remains of a woman were found near Norwalk, Connecticut. And she was found by the Norwalk Police Scuba Team and Fire Rescue Team. And authorities located clothing and personal items left on the bank of the Norwalk River before eventually discovering her body. And she is named Paige Fannin. And I don't believe there is any known cause of death in her case yet.
Okay, so she's been identified.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Can you I love that you got this map here. Can you zoom in just a little bit further on that?
Yeah.
Right. So that's the Norwalk River. That's right there.
Okay.
So pretty significant river that runs through there.
Paige. I'm trying to get her name updated here. All right. Paige Fannin. What do you guys think about the items being left at the water's edge?
Yeah, I don't know if that indicated she went for a swim or something like that.
Okay.
Could have been something casual. I'm not really sure if that's a swimming area or not. Didn't really strike me as that, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure that there's anything suspicious necessarily about her death at this point.
Right. And officially, there is no suspicion that's being mentioned by law enforcement on that. No cause of death that's actually been released, and certainly no comments about it being a homicide investigation.
Right. I do want to mention that the family and friends of Paige have a GoFundMe. They've exceeded their goal. They've done a great job exceeding the $12,000 goal, but more can always be given. And if you go to GoFundMe, it's in loving memory of Paige Alize Fanning. So that's Paige, Paige. Her middle name is, I've never seen this name before, Aliehs, and the last name is Fannon. So that's the GoFundMe if people want to contribute to that. But that was the first one that technically popped onto our radar, or technically popped onto the social media speculation mill, rumor mill.
Gotcha.
Can I jump in and ask a question? You had mentioned that, and it seems like a situation where she would have went swimming. What temperature is it that time of year? I don't see anybody swimming out there that time of year willingly.
I mean, even right now, I wouldn't see anyone swimming in there. I hate to say it, but I think the clothing left there and her being in the water seems very like taking your own life type stuff. But by all indications, reading about her on this GoFundMe and the articles that were written, no one had ever said, unless I missed something, no one had ever said that she was struggling with any sort of emotional issues.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any mention of that here. All right. What's the next case?
And yeah, so same day, March 6th, 2025, there were unidentified remains located by a hunter in a wooded area in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And this one had no information on gender, age, or cause of death. So not much to go on this one. Plymouth is quite a ways from Norwalk.
Yeah.
So I would say no reason to believe these two are connected other than the date they were found.
They're at the exact opposite ends of this whole collection. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And found on the same day. But that being said, we don't know date of death on a lot of these instances. We know the date of the discovery. So it could, potentially be that someone had died weeks before. And something that we do bump into with a couple of the cases is a description of decomposition that's happened, or the remains being so decomposed that they're having trouble identifying what happened. So definitely it's a big X factor in this, outside of I think 3 of the cases we have a date of death. 2 of them we have a specific day. 1 of them we have kind of a range we could figure out. But yeah, it makes them really, really tough. So this one in Plymouth, found by a hunter. And that's about all we know. No other real details on that. Found on March 6th, 2025.
Did we say
Morph,
that that's a skull?
we can say
The
that.
Plymouth one is a skull. Yeah.
That one's a skull that was found. Okay.
And who knows? That could have been there for ages.
Right. Morph, tell us about Suzanne Wormser.
So Suzanne Wormser's case starts in Groton, Connecticut, not to be confused with the other Groton. On March 19th, police responded to a call regarding a suspicious item near the bus stop. This is along Route 11 in that area. And this was a black wielded suitcase, and it had a foul odor. So obviously you get a suitcase with something that does not smell good inside. You might be nervous to open it. So police were called, and sure enough, they open it up. And inside that suitcase was the torso of a woman in a trash bag. The body had been dismembered and dumped at that cemetery. And they believe that the body had been there since mid-February. They released an important clue because they had no ID, but one thing they felt was that this victim had something called Turner syndrome, which is some kind of chromosomal disorder that can cause physical characteristics like short stature, broad chest, short, wide neck, and small chin. And the identity of this body was later confirmed to be 58-year-old Suzanne Wormser. And it turns out she did have that Turner syndrome, as they suspected. Now, City of Groton police chief David Burton, his name is, believed that she was killed in or near the cemetery where she was found in. But it didn't take a long time to get an arrest here because 6 weeks after her remains were found, her roommate, 68-year-old Donald Koffel, was charged with her murder, and as well as tampering with physical evidence, improper disposal of a body. And I think police would have found him anyway, but her sister had called in a tip after seeing a press release about the body found. She hadn't heard from Suzanne in quite some time. She was worried, and she knew something was wrong. So, she got them to check, and they found this guy. And it wasn't, just her that was concerned. Neighbors of Suzanne's also brought up Donald Koffel. And the story with him is he had been a neighbor before moving out of state, but he returned to the area in early December 2024. Suzanne allowed him to live with her because he had no place to go, apparently. And by the time police got around to questioning him and trying to see if he was involved, he was in the hospital with treatment being done for pancreatic cancer. So a very serious situation, not much time to try and get him to reveal facts if he had them, because he was in, late stage. Now, the crime scene inside Suzanne's home was pretty bad. There was blood spatter on the walls, on the furniture. A bloody bat had been hidden behind a bookcase. There were clumps of hair stuck to it. They found Suzanne's purse, her ID card, and other belongings in there too. And then, another person came forward to admit, or to give a tip, that Koffel had admitted that he beat Suzanne to death with a baseball bat. And according to him, the story he gave was that she had stolen $200 worth of cocaine from him. So police are, interrogating him at his hospital bed, I assume, and he confessed to the murder. And, according to him, he gave gruesome details of how he hit her in the head with a bat. And it's pretty gruesome, the details that he gave. But then pretty disturbing thing is that he lived in that home with her dead body for almost 2 weeks before he decided to use a handsaw to dismember her remains. And that saw was also recovered from her apartment. And then from there, he stuffed her torso into the suitcase and distributed the rest of her body parts into two trash bags. And he used different dumpsters to get rid of those body parts. And as far as I can tell, the rest of her remains have not been located. And Donald Koffel was being held on a bond of $1 million. He had a scheduled court date of June 10th, but fate intervened and he died from that pancreatic cancer on April 25th. So as far as we can tell, this is a standalone case, not connected to any others. It seems like it's a dispute between two people that sadly ended in violence.
Yeah, and I believe the cemetery was only a matter of like hundreds of feet from the apartment that they were living at, right?
It was very close, and I'm assuming because of his advanced illness, he probably didn't have the strength to go very far.
Right. So far we've talked about 4 cases. 2 of them have been ruled homicide, but in this one we actually have a solve. We have the person admit to it. There's charges filed. He dies before he could face those charges. So obviously that's not related. We've got 2 other cases that have no cause of death that's been publicly released. One of them potentially an accidental situation that happened with Paige, or something else along the lines of self-harm is a possibility. And then, of course, the skull where we don't know that the hunter found. All right, let's go ahead and get to the next one. Tim or Lance?
All right. So this one is about missing person Denise Leary. So she had been missing from New Haven, Connecticut. She's a mom. She went missing on September 30th of 2024. And her body was found March 20th, 2025 in a wooded area in kind of a residential neighborhood, it seems like. So she went missing under pretty suspicious circumstances, I have to say. We cover missing people a lot on our show, Missing, and this seems like it's going down that path of a case that a woman has never been found, because her son was asked by her to shut her phone location off before she went missing. Her son Joshua.
Okay.
She also was picked up by an unknown individual around 10:30 p.m., I guess somewhere around that September 30th, 2024 date. And she also vanished from her room in her place of living. So it was locked from the inside, and she apparently went out the window and I think climbed down and got outside.
Very strange for a 59-year-old woman to do something like that. Like, just what would be the I mean, I guess if you wanted someone else that was living in the house to not know that you had left, but I mean, yeah, she's 59. She's not 16. That's really strange.
Yes.
It is reported that she had schizophrenia as well.
Oh, okay.
What level of that? Like, I'm not a doctor, right? So I don't know how serious schizophrenia can be, but I'm under the assumption she was taking medication for it. And the instance where Tim referenced her son being told by her to turn her location off on her phone, she had this, I don't want to call it a date, but she was meeting with somebody on a night that was close to when she disappeared, but she came back. So she had gone out with this mystery person. Before she did, she told her son, turn the location off on my phone. I'm thinking that's just somebody not technically savvy enough to do it herself.
Mm-hmm.
And then she left. And according to a couple of newspaper reports, the family had said that they were not aware of who the person was, and they really didn't get a look at the person who she left with. So those are the mysterious circumstances that go into her disappearance. And we don't know if those are completely separate from the discovery of her body.
Right.
Right. So her death has been ruled undetermined at this point. There is no information, and the police went as far as saying there's no indication of criminality in the case. And it seems like essentially they put that out there because they found her remains in an advanced state of decay.
Okay.
And so the investigators at the scene could not determine her gender or age even when she was found. So I have to imagine she had been there for at least a couple of months, if not closer to 6 months.
Right. So yeah, it's an interesting phrasing because there's cases where I've worked with families and the social information points to a very high probability that something happened to their loved one, that someone did something to them. But police will sometimes use that same type of phrasing. Well, we don't have any indicators of anything like that. So it's one of those things. I wish we could take comfort in hearing that and saying, well, hey, look, that means that there isn't a foul play element here. But that's not what that phrasing is about. It's really that they have not been able to detect any type of foul play element that's happened with that particular case. And admittedly, I also cover a lot of missing persons cases. Schizophrenia comes up relatively frequently in them. There's a lot of very troubling side effects that people deal with that, including full-blown hallucinations. And sometimes that can lead to self-harm situations, but also accidental situations or kind of unintended accidental situations because of this version of reality that the person is dealing with. So, yeah. Lance, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the timeline there of Denise's story, where she had been missing since September 30th of 2024, and her body was discovered on March 20th of 2025. And Tim had said that he had imagined that due to the fact that the reports are saying her body was in an advanced state of decay, and they weren't able to recognize a gender, or, they weren't able to identify her or recognize a gender or an age, that her death must have happened pretty soon after she was, or right around that time period that she was declared a missing person, right around that September 30th, 2024 time period. And it just makes me wonder, and it makes me hope that investigators are looking at other incidents that might have happened around that time period. Maybe there are other missing people that were reported in August of 2024 or, October of 2024. Is there any microcluster that's happening there that we can look at?
Right.
And I know Morph is the Golden State Killer expert. And I'm wondering, is that something that was implemented during an investigation back then? Were they looking at missing people around the same period of time?
I don't think they really looked at missing people because, all the victims that they tied to him or, thought were the same person were not taken. Well, they were sometimes taken out of the house, but not they didn't disappear and wind up in different locations a long time later. But probably there were some people that said, hey, so-and-so is missing. Maybe it's, has something to do with, the East Area Rapist or the Golden State Killer, whatever moniker he was at the time. I mean, and the same thing you can go even to the Zodiac case. Anything that happened in the San Francisco Bay Area, people would say, what if it's Zodiac? And I mean, there's, hundreds of miles there with lots of criminals that were operating back then. So I think it would be natural for people to say, well, maybe it's the Zodiac Killer. And, 99.9% of the time, it probably didn't have anything to do with the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah, I think there's another important point to make here, and it's something that Morph actually brought up when we first started talking about these cases. And even just a couple of weeks ago here on the channel, I released a whole episode that I titled Spring Solves, because we've come to know from, doing this type of work year after year, that when spring comes, all of a sudden there's a lot of discoveries of bodies and missing persons that happen. In this instance, it looks like she was found by people that were clearing brush from a wooded area behind a house. And we know that we had another case where it was a hunter that found a skull. So I do think that it was a really good point, Morph, that you had brought up about, these spring discoveries are kind of getting intertwined, because when you look at this list, it does seem harrowing. Like, I've got this, Excel sheet I put together, and just look at all the dates of discovery, at least from the March ones: March 6th, March 6th, March 19th, March 20th, March 26th, April 9th, April 21st, April 22nd, April 23rd, another one, April 25th, April 30th. But I think that is speaking to, well, at least some of these are speaking to that trend, that it is time for these kind of spring solves that also happen here.
Yeah, and I wonder, would that terrain out there, Tim and Lance probably know it better than any of us, but are these areas for the most part that people wouldn't go to unless the weather was nice? I mean, is it hard to get to some of these areas where some of the stuff is happening?
I don't know about hard to get to so much as you just don't go for walks in the winter in New England for the most part. And, there's a lot of leaves that fall. And if it's in a wooded area, people aren't really going to clean up those leaves, so they conceal things. But it's not like a huge cover. It's just like some leaves. So it actually makes a whole lot of sense to me that we see bodies being found in the springtime when the weather gets a little warmer and people actually do get outside and hit the trails.
What was the snow like this year for you guys? Was there snow that would have concealed it until it melted away when the weather warmed up a little bit?
Maybe, but I don't see, not Connecticut. I mean, any snowfall that we had here didn't last very long. We seem to have a couple of, good size, like, a few inches here and there, but it was usually followed up by a few mild days or some rain. And
there's some ice.
Yeah, we did have a lot of ice.
Yeah, we had like ice. Like my yard was completely frozen for like 3 weeks in like February. So right after that is when things started thawing and bodies started being found.
Did I just hear your accent try to break through there? Did you say started? Did I hear that right?
Yes, you did. Good to hear.
And his whole yard just froze over.
The yard, it started.
I think it's funny more if you said terrain. And when you say terrain, I think of like our buddy Jason Watts, who does these searches in, the Texas, like this areas in Texas that have like cacti and rattlesnakes and wild boars, and he's organizes searches to go look for bodies in there. And that when I hear terrain, like, that's what I think of. Like, I think I gotta put special gear on to go into this area. I don't really think there's anything like that for any of these bodies that have been found out here. Like,
but some of the areas are pretty thick, like the area where Moore and Murray went missing. Wasn't that an area that's got a lot of different
for sure
stuff you got to navigate?
Yeah, but you're talking like you're at the base of the White Mountains, like the White Mountains National Forest, or I don't know if it's an actual national forest, but it's like you're talking like.
But it's not far. It's a few miles from where Moore's car was found. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's very far from where these bodies have been found.
Let's get to the next one. So the one after Denise.
Okay, so on March 26th, 2025, the remains of a missing woman were located. And the family believes her death is suspicious, but is adamant that she was not the victim of a serial killer. And this family has spoken out on Facebook, in their own loved ones group, but also on the New England serial killer Facebook pages. There are a few of those that exist out there on Facebook. And there's a lot of information similar to what we're talking about that gets shared. A lot of articles, a lot of flyers of missing people from New England gets shared in those groups. They appeared in those groups and pleaded with the folks of those groups to not include their loved one in this overarching story of a serial killer in New England. They actually said they believe they know who did it.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. And then we get
I want to I want to give just a little quick piece on that. We recently had, Tim had mentioned Dr. Michael Arnfield, who came on our show, and that episode is out on Crawlspace, but he gave this example. He gave this description that this particular story, this woman who the family doesn't want mentioned because when her name is brought into this conversation of the New England serial killer, it creates a narrative that is not true. And Michael Arnfield on the show, and Tim and I were just blown away by this. He brings up this example of like how people are digesting the media's coverage of anything that's true crime. And he said back in the day, the literary world would give out the Edgar Award. And when they realized that crime was a legit genre, it was originally called fact crime, not true crime, fact crime. So he brought that up. And then that led into Michael asking the question, whose truth does true crime convey? And this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
If people so desperately want there to be a serial killer, they're going to include this woman's name, despite the family saying, like, we know who did it. This is not factual. So I just wanted to put
it's not
that out
only
there.
social media, right? Because I think I ran into her name on a legit news source as being.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
When this all started, there was a handful of names, and she was always like in those 4 or 5 top names that came up until people actually had to start making an effort. But I just thought that was just an incredible, like, reflective thing, right? Like, whose truth does true crime convey?
Yeah.
And it's always important to approach these cases ethically when somebody puts that out there and requests, hey, please don't talk about my family. We ran our New England on criminology, our New England series, I think a month ago now. And it was before we knew that they didn't want their name out there. So we did use their name. But I think they were just at that moment putting it out that they didn't want her name used.
Yeah.
But in the past, I mean, on the Murder of My Family, I've actually taken episodes down after they were published because the family said, we're going to court and we don't want this to sway something from, a verdict or whatever. So, I've even taken that step to remove a video or audio.
The only thing there, and I think most of the time this would not be the case, but there is a particular time where, and you guys know, like when it comes to ethics, like I'm always keeping an eye on it and trying to keep myself in check. The only instance where I might decide that something needs to stay up is if it looks like a family member could be a suspect or a person of interest, and it's someone that's part of their support team that's trying to get that information taken down, which I have seen happen. It's super, super rare. And, in most cases, I would definitely err on the side of caution. I don't think that's what we're looking at in this case at all. But yeah, it is. It's a tricky line. And it's to that same point about what Lance was saying, like whose truth is it?
It was right. Michael Arnfield who said that.
Yeah.
I was just parodying him.
Yep. All right. So what do we, first of all, I didn't know that Connecticut had a place called Killingly, and how did that not wind up in a fictional crime show yet? But Killingly, Connecticut is where we would find another body.
Yes. Good point about the name of that town. Yeah, and in this one, there's no information on gender, age, or cause of death either. So this one's a very vague one.
It is close to the last one, seemingly. They're both kind of in the center of this whole conspiracy theory.
I think one confusing thing, too, is this case was a different Groton. There's a couple. What's one in? They're pretty good distance from each other, though, right?
Yeah, I believe there's one in Massachusetts, too.
Yeah, and I think since they're both cases close to those areas, each of those Grotons, I think some of them get crossed, mixed up. Maybe they think they're the same place, but they're definitely 2 different places.
Yeah. Well, for a
I
social
will
media
say,
post, that grouping is convenient.
Connecticut State Police are really keeping tight-lipped on this because really, like, just doing searches as we speak, there's nothing really new. But one thing that is interesting is that the remains were discovered near some railroad tracks, which I'm not even sure if those railroad tracks are active, but that's where the remains of the body were found.
And then we have another body that is found in the water, close to Tidewater Landing. Not much reported on this one at all. Just literally that there was a body pulled from the water on, I think it was April 21st. Unknown sex, no information, no cause of death publicly released. Obviously, no information where we could determine the date of death. And it was literally just that a boater spotted the body, called out the police, and they removed the body from the water. And then that brings us to the story of Megan Meredith. Who knows the most about this one?
Well, we've been talking about her death a little bit, so we can tackle it.
Okay.
Yeah, so on April 22nd, 2025, 45-year-old Megan Meredith's body was found near a bike path in Springfield, Massachusetts. And this death is being investigated as a homicide. It is officially a homicide at this point. There were a couple of odd things about this. It's been determined to be a homicide, but Gallooni, the DA, Anthony Gallooni, said that there's no threat to the public. So I'm a little confused about that. She was also unresponsive when she was found by police, actually, discovered by police. And she only died after they found her. And in no way am I trying to say that the police are to be suspected in this case. She was unresponsive when she was found. But it is a little strange. It almost seems like some of these facts got misreported, but if they're not, I'm just a little confused at the order of operations in this one.
Yeah, and this is one of the few that we can determine the date of death, because obviously they found her and she was unresponsive, but she was still alive. So we know that April 22nd is when she did die. Was officially ruled a homicide, but they haven't released cause of death or any real details, right? You haven't bumped into any details about what her injuries were or anything?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's frustrating when you don't have even those details when it's so fresh. That's the problem with doing sometimes these cases that are breaking, sort of. You don't have all the information. And I'm curious. I'm trying to see on the map. Can you expand that a little bit, John, to make that map more visible, to get a sense of where that's at?
Yeah, sure. Let me bring up the satellite view.
Right on the Connecticut River. The bike path overlooks the Connecticut River.
And one thing, if they're saying, there's been times where they don't know who did it, and they'll say, they don't want to get the public in a stir, so they'll be like, oh, there's no risk. And normally, if you say there's no risk to the public, how do you know that if you don't know who did it? And maybe they do know who did it, and they're just trying to build a case against that person.
Yeah, I'd hope so. To that end, I think them not releasing the cause of death is probably a tactic as well. So they can have some information that they keep private. And if anybody comes forward, they can know stuff that wasn't, details that weren't put into the press.
All right, let's keep it rolling.
Also, I have a question for you. Just a quick opinion question on this one.
Yeah.
It just occurred to me right now. So she's discovered she's unresponsive. She passes later on. Do you think that was a tactic on police's end too, to say that maybe whoever did this might think that before she was declared deceased, maybe she gave the name or the identity of the person? So maybe this is like designed to make someone nervous?
I mean, if I was going to make a play like that, I wouldn't say that she was unresponsive, right?
That's a great point.
I mean, unless they were trying to justify in that person's head, because if they had thought that she had expired and they had witnessed it, then saying unresponsive would give them a little kernel of doubt about like, oh, maybe, I actually didn't kill her. But I think it would be scarier to them if I was going to make a play like that, I'd say, oh, we were able to revive her, but unfortunately she died at the hospital shortly after. Something along those lines. But it's a good question.
Or really freak them out by saying she was able to give us some information before.
Yeah, seriously.
I mean, you might as well say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it, might as well go all the way with it.
Yeah. All right. So now so basically so far we have had 3 of these cases where it was actually ruled homicide. But then we get to this next one. You want to take this one, Lance?
4. I believe that's 4 if we're counting Joanne Gorelli.
Okay, and then the other case, the unnamed victim, that is seemingly confirmed a homicide as well. The one where we're redacting the name effectively. So, okay, gotcha. All right, and this next one certainly is. Lance, you want to tell us about Andrew and Jonathan?
Oh, sure. Yes, on April 23rd, Andrew Gumpel, 41 years old, and 42-year-old Jonathan Thompson, they were beaten and stabbed to death. They were found behind a Walmart in Salem, Massachusetts. There are a couple of reports saying near a Walmart or in the woods behind a Walmart, but either way, it was a local Walmart in Salem, Massachusetts. They were buried in dirt. I don't know how deep they were buried. I don't know. It feels like kind of a haphazard way to throw dirt on the body so that they're not immediately discovered. But we do have somebody in custody, 30-year-old Jay Blodgett. He's facing 2 counts of murder. And the prosecutor, James Gubatos, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name, was quoted as saying, "We eventually found 2 individuals with apparent blunt force trauma and stab wounds that were deceased. They were hidden in the woods by various items and dirt." And the suspect, Jay Blodgett, is a unhoused man who has resided in and about the area of Salem, Massachusetts. And by all accounts, he's going to be charged with this, but that's where we're at here.
Okay.
Now, we don't know much about what evidence they have against him. Is that correct?
Against Blodgett? No.
Yeah. So, and I always get scared when I hear the local, maybe the creepy guy, someone refer to somebody like that, the scary guy, that guy that walks around town, stay away from them. They sort of get that reputation, and sometimes it might be they're homeless or they're on, they're dependent on something. But a lot of times they're convenient scapegoats, and I hope the police have something solid on him to have him in custody.
The only other thing that might help with that understanding is, from what I get, I think he broke into like a storage area and he was trying to sleep there, and someone came across him and he was so freaked out, he offered them money, and he offered them $2,000. So it just makes me wonder, and the article was written saying that that it assumed that he had panhandled for the $2,000, but knowing that he could be, a murderer of 2, could robbery have been part of the motive? These bodies were found behind a Walmart. It makes me think about that possibility that he was, he killed these guys and took their cash, basically.
Now, what's interesting is, how does one guy overcome 2 people?
Well, we don't know if
one could get away, or they could fight back, or
I don't know if these guys were together. I don't know if these guys even knew each other. Do you guys have any insight on that?
Yeah, they were from out of state. I have some notes here. Let me just see here. Yeah, so the 2 victims were 41-year-old Andrew Gumpel from Arizona, and 42-year-old Jonathan Thompson from Oregon. So maybe they weren't with each other when they wound up there, but it is odd that they're from far out west. So, it's not clear, at least from what I had at the time, that they, had, a connection to each other. But from being out west, I found that interesting.
Yeah. I couldn't find any solid details on that.
I do think that's interesting, But Salem is, even outside of October, Salem is a pretty significant tourist attraction. So there's a number of different represented areas in the country and the world that visit Salem, again, even outside of October. To revisit that storage unit that we brought up that he was trying to, or that he was discovered in, that was also close to the Walmart. And that's kind of where everyone saw him. He was well known by a lot of people in that area to be the guy who is not, the guy without a home who has made, his life on the streets of Salem. And everyone seemed to be very shocked about it. There's articles written where people were quoted by saying like they were shocked that he was always a very nice individual whenever they encountered him. But, just it goes to show you like you just don't know how close people are as far as being on the brink. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see what comes out, what they do have against him, and if it goes to trial or whatever, what comes out. I just remember when I was a kid having some sketchy people around town that maybe were homeless or they looked a little creepy, and there were all these rumors about don't go near that person, blah blah blah. And looking back now, I realize there were just people that were down on their luck or they had issues. No signs of them harming anybody. So, it always makes me think of that kind of stuff when somebody like this is, picked up for the game. He may be, responsible. Maybe they have something rock solid against him that they know he's the killer. But, it'll be interesting to see what comes out.
Tim, you want to take us to the next one?
Okay, so on April 25th, Bristol County District Attorney Thomas Quinn confirmed that Samuel Stovall, 51, of Taunton, Massachusetts, was found in Mill River by folks walking by. And apparently there were obvious signs of decomposition. Quinn's office said the death has not been deemed suspicious, but that the investigation remains open. Quinn said that Stovall was unhoused and was known to Taunton police.
Right.
Looking into this gentleman, his obituary reads very complimentary. He went through a lot of difficulties in his life. Apparently, he had found a new lease on life through religion and was dedicating himself to, doing God's work. And his family and friends, quote, remembered him for his, quote, remarkable resilience in overcoming adversity.
So on April 30th, 2025, the remains of 39-year-old Stephen Myers were found in a construction site, also in Taunton, Massachusetts. And the district attorney said that Myers died as a result of a gunshot wound.
Now, that's pretty strange. What do you guys think about the phrasing on that one? Because my first gut instinct is like, oh, that's a homicide, but not necessarily, right?
Definitely kind of gives you the image, or at least gives me the mental image of like a organized crime hit or something like that. But this could very well not be suspicious at all.
Yeah, there's only one other little hint that I was able to find on this one in terms of trying to make that determination. And that was, it took place next to a technical school or like a high school. And it was noted that the school did not go into lockdown. Nothing happened around their operations, which I would think that if it was identified to have been a homicide, that would have been instant. I'm surprised it didn't happen just based off the discovery of the body, just kind of instantly anyways. But it's kind of hard to tell. So we don't have a determination on that one. We have, interestingly, a cause of death, but we don't know if this is actually a homicide or if this is a self-harm situation.
Right. But authorities did say that there is no connection between Myers and the school. So it's not like he worked there or anything like that. So seems like, yeah.
But I would just say, I mean, I think even if you have anything identified as a gunman within, I would say, a few blocks of a school, that school's probably going on lockdown.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
All right. Lance, you want to take this next one?
Sure. Yeah. I'd love to take this next one because it's one that came up while looking into these two other gentlemen that were from Taunton, Massachusetts. We mentioned Myers and
Stovall.
who's the Stovall, yeah. We mentioned Myers and Stovall, and in this one article that I came across, they mentioned 72-year-old Glastonbury, Connecticut resident Mary Colasento, and she was not on the list that we had originally been looking at, and I'm curious why her name doesn't come up more often, but she was reported missing on Sunday morning, October 8th in 2023. She was reported missing.
Wow.
Yeah. She was last seen wearing dark pants and a light colored top, and the circumstances of her disappearance are unclear. And at the time, in an article that was written right around her disappearance, authorities had been taking it very seriously. They were very urgent in it, and there were many groups involved. There was the Glastonbury Police Department, Patrol and Investigations Division, the Connecticut State Police Canine Teams, the Capital Region Emergency Services Team, and Hartford, Connecticut Dive Teams. And they had all been looking into her disappearance, and they coordinated really well during those early days, but apparently they hadn't found anything. And then there was a missing person report that was filed on 6 a.m. That's what launched the search effort. And it was focused on the Glastonbury Boathouse. And the boathouse is a scenic area adjacent to the Connecticut River. And that was searched thoroughly. A boater had spotted Colasanto parking her car at the Glastonbury Boathouse at approximately 12:30 in the morning. And I believe that was reported at 9 a.m. on Sunday, the day she was reported missing. And this is according to the Department of Justice, National Missing and Unidentified Person System. This is according to NamUs. And she was last seen walking to the Connecticut River. This is, again, according to NamUs. Her vehicle was discovered that same morning, several hours later, in the parking lot, but her body was yet to be located. So they had dive teams, they had canine search teams, and it wasn't until that April 30th of 2025 where her body had been discovered in the Connecticut River.
Wow.
So sorry to make that complicated, but I didn't realize how far back this story went. So she's declared missing in 2023. She's seen parking at this boathouse at 12:30 in the morning. That's reported at 9 a.m. and almost immediately a search is conducted. And we have representatives from NamUs telling us what went into that search and giving details on the timeline. And nothing happened then until fast forward to now, where her body is now part of this conversation. So again, this goes back to 2023.
Yeah. And we are, if there's anything that is kind of making this case an outlier for me, the age trend that we're seeing is really 40s to 50s. With a couple of 30s sprinkled in there, and Mary was 72 years old. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of an outlier there. Again, we don't know what the ruling is. And even cause of death, I guess we're kind of assuming it's drowning just because of where she was found, but we don't know that for a fact as well. So a lot of questions left on that.
A lot of questions. I think the reason why I'm bringing this one up is because her name wasn't included in it wasn't included in the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And is it because of her age? Is it because of the time that she disappeared? Like, did it just not fit the narrative?
Right.
Do we have Margaret Hammersley on the list?
No.
Okay, because this was a case that I thought had some similarities, and I don't have a lot of information about it. But her body in, that age range that you just mentioned, she was 73 years old. Her body was found on the 21st of March. found in Forge Pond, near Groton, Massachusetts. She had been reported missing 1 day earlier from Nashua, New Hampshire. And that's about all that I could find on that. I don't know a cause of death or anything like that. And I haven't seen any updates on that. But, when you mentioned that age, the water aspect, the Groton, coming up, hers was a case that I had seen in some places as possibly being connected to these other cases, but it's not everywhere.
Okay. And is that the Connecticut, Groton, Connecticut?
It's the Groton, Massachusetts.
Right?
Yeah.
Massachusetts. Okay. All right. Well, I'll put her on the list too. Tim, you want to get the next one?
Sure. Yeah, this is really kind of a wild story here. So on May 7th, 2025, the murdered remains of 35-year-old Nyesha Mendez were found at the Evergreen Cemetery in New Haven, Connecticut. Strange that that's the second group of remains found at a cemetery, but Edwin Arroyo Roman of New Haven was actually charged with Mendez's murder, as well as tampering with evidence. And Edwin Arroyo Roman not only confessed to Mendez's murder, but he actually confessed to 3 murders in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
So interesting story here. There's really not anything else that I can find on him as far as these confessions that he made about murders in Puerto Rico. I would hope that authorities in Connecticut have called Puerto Rico and tried to find out if there's any legitimacy to that confession. But we could have an actual serial killer here, but probably or potentially not a murderer from the mainland here.
Right. All right. Well, let's bring up this sheet and take a look. So that is all the cases that we've seen in one way or another kind of get attached to this theory. We do have a number of them ruled as homicides, but some of these that have solves. So in Naisha's case, I'm going to go ahead and just undo this highlight because we know we've got someone that's accepting responsibility there. On Andrew and Jonathan, we know that there are charges filed there. On Suzanne, which it's almost another weird thing that those 2 bodies were found in cemeteries, and those are 2 of the cases that are actually solved, and they're different people. But we can go ahead and clear that one. So really, for the ones where we don't know what has happened yet, we have the one with the redacted name that we've discussed, and it seems like the family's fairly confident that they have an understanding of what's going on with that case.
Yeah, so they call it suspicious. I was just looking into it as we were going. So it's been ruled suspicious, not officially a homicide, but apparently there was potentially some bags found with her, like a trash bag type of situation, but not officially a homicide.
Okay, but the family's being extremely clear, not tied to this theory at all. So we could pull that one out as well. So that brings us down to really, we have 2 ruled homicides, and both of them in Springfield. And that's the Megan Meredith case and the Joanne Gorelli case. Do you guys think that there's any possibility that those could be connected?
I for sure do. There's not much information on either one. And they were found very close to each other. Like, this is a matter of like a couple of miles, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it is interesting that we're talking about a serial killer in all these cases. But if you whittle it down, there may actually be 2 serial killers here. One confessed. So I don't know. We're just maybe. And then these Springfield murders, definitely want to know more about this. And there's not much else out there about these murders right now.
Yeah, John, can you just go in a little bit on that area that you're looking at right there? This is the Springfield one, right?
Yeah. 1.5 miles. Well, almost less than 2 miles between these 2. Yeah.
Right. And it's right at the Forest Park, like region,
Right.
like area right there. I would just wonder how much surveillance is in there, how many police officers or rangers go through there just kind of patrolling. Also, are there cameras at certain intersections there, like on the bike path or something like that? And if we're trying to come to terms with the fact that these might be connected and this might be the work of someone who is acting as a serial killer, is this an area that is safe for them to operate? Kind of on the outskirts of a park, within the park, limited, CCTV or anything like that. This might be
That's
maybe
interesting.
a good area.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, because it is this one that's kind of on the edge of the park and then right into a neighborhood area. And on Meredith, yeah, I mean, it was a bikeway, right? It was the bike trail that she's found on.
Right near the Basketball Hall of Fame.
That could be a trend that you're spotting there.
And I live pretty close to Springfield. I live like a half an hour from these spots that we're talking about. So I've actually been to Forest Park several times. It's a very large park. There's actually a zoo in the park. They do something called Bright Nights in the holiday season, where it's like a driving path where it's a lot of lights lit up. A lot of kids in that park generally. Actually, I think we took our engagement photos in that park a few years ago. So it's huge. Definitely some water in the park as well. I don't know about cameras. I will say I'm not too keen on that, but I do know that there are like ranger stations in the park as well.
Okay. Well, something I'm starting to wonder, because I've been seeing a trend with a lot of cases that I cover lately where law enforcement is seemingly playing things extremely close to the vest. Are we getting to a point where you guys think that law enforcement is doing this because of the effect that social media, true crime media is having on them and their cases? Is this the new norm at this point, that we're going to have almost 20 cases we talked about here, and more than half of them we can't even tell you if it's a natural death, accidental death, or homicide?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, I wonder if it's indicative of the policing in that area. If that region, they choose to do things a different way than, say, someone down here in Florida or in Texas or out west. I wonder if any of that might be at play.
Lance?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think at this point in our social media society, I think these cases that break, it's just now that law enforcement or representatives from law enforcement will look at them and try to figure out a way where they can make the voice of the people through social media help them or become a hindrance. Like, what details are we releasing that's going to help? Because we're going to release something, but we got to make sure, like, okay, how is this going to be spun by the public on social media? I don't think they expected this, though. This is brand new as far as like a cluster of bodies over a short period of time that are seemingly unrelated. Some of them solved, some of them not even, determined to be any particular sex or age or anything, but they're just getting put into this category. And personally, I think like a lot of these law enforcement agencies are scrambling. And again, to bring up Michael Arnfield, he was adamant that somebody from an agency, and he kind of said, like, listen, it has to be the FBI. He didn't say that specifically, but it was more like, it needs to be somebody in a position of authority that's not connected to a particular town. And if we have to say, like, someone from the FBI has to come out and definitively say something, that's what's going to stop the public from speculating like this. But at this point, it's already become...
Nothing's ever going to stop the public from speculating like this.
Yeah. And right. Even the FBI comes out. I understand what Michael Arnfield was saying, and I get the power of the FBI, but the FBI comes out and the next headline is going to be like, FBI addresses possible serial killer in New England. that's not going to do anything to
right,
stop rumors.
Right. You know, the New York Post is waiting for that headline. I can tell you right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's the unfortunate new norm that the law enforcement agencies in this country have to, navigate around, because it's not going to go away. And actually, you brought up the Taylor Swift thing at the beginning of the episode, and Tim and I were talking about this in an episode that we just recorded. If there was some sort of like media god that was looking upon this case, these stories, and said, boy, it's starting to fizzle out. We need some sort of public figure. We need that name in there somehow to just completely accelerate this.
Right.
Who could it be? It's Taylor Swift. Like, this is law enforcement looking. I can imagine law enforcement looking at this and being like, how in the world is the most famous person in the world now attached to this?
Right. Well, but that might not be an accident. I think you're making a really, really good point. And the truth of the leg bone that was found there is it wasn't found in her backyard. It was found 200 yards away. She's got
a big house though, 200 yards. That's only 2 football fields, John.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
You can run that in about 14 seconds.
There are also other mansions in that area. Probably
that's what I mean.
Famous people.
Well, but not as famous as her.
Too.
Right. Not as famous as her. I mean, I think you could do it with many different cases. Like, I think if you found remains out in Malibu somewhere, you could be like, oh my God, just found next to Leonardo DiCaprio's home. I think you could do the same thing. And I think because of this story, I think we are going to see more of that. I do just want to touch on this because this is news that just came out today. They have already done an identification. So human remains found near Taylor Swift's home may be missing local. They've been identified as those of 61-year-old Kevin Poissant, a local man who had been missing since March. The Rhode Island Medical Examiner's Office carried out the identification and reported no signs of foul play. Police have firmly rejected the serial killer narrative. Westerly Police Department said the facts point to individual circumstances, and in Mr. Poissant's case, no criminal activity is suspected. And they had to put it back down here in big letters for everyone, Morph. No connection to Taylor Swift.
Yeah, they put that at the bottom, though.
Yeah.
Right.
The Swifty part reels him in at the top, and then they disclose that it's not related in any way to her at the bottom of the story.
Yeah.
A little more info on him. He was known in the area. He had no history of violence or disputes. He had struggled with health issues, and he may have become disoriented before his disappearance. So that's sounding like possibly an accident in that situation.
I did want to run a case by you guys that's not talked about a lot and just get your take on it, and maybe you could plot it on a map and see how close it really is. But it was a case that reminded me of Paige Fannin. And this is a guy named Eric Ween of Mansfield, Massachusetts. Okay. He, on April 10th, 2025, his car was found. And this was found on Ocean Road in South Kingstown, Rhode Island. Now, I don't know how far that is from Mansfield, Massachusetts, where he lived. But he was reported missing. There's been no sign of him. And I think that car is pretty close to water, if I remember correctly. And I think that the similarities were a little bit like Paige Fannin's case. So I'm waiting for something to come out more, but I'm curious if you could tell me how close it actually is in proximity to the other cases we've been talking about.
It's right in the middle.
Yeah. Definitely in the range. I think Seekonk came up. This is not far from there, not far from Plymouth. Pawtucket, I believe, came up as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's definitely in that range.
When did this happen, Morph?
This was so April 10th, his car was found. And I don't have the date in front of me when he went missing. I think it was
he was reported missing on April 18th.
Okay, yeah, he was reported missing after his car was found. So I'm not sure about that gap in between the time.
Looks like his car was towed. It was illegally parked
Mhm.
and towed. So that might have been part of the delay there in ruling him a missing person.
Yeah, it was just interesting that there's no sign of him out there. And, I thought of the Fanning case when I first read this one.
And he hasn't been found.
No updates that I could find on his case.
Well, along these
Interesting.
lines, I think it's important to ask why do people group stuff in this way? Like I had previously mentioned, smiley face killer, the pusher, the anti-vax doctors. I even hit a trend a couple years ago where all of a sudden it was minority teens from DC that were all going missing. Why does the public do this? Tim?
Well, I think we're human, John. I think humans seek patterns, and when bodies are found in this sort of in a small enough area, in a short enough period of time, I think people start wondering. And yeah, I do think it also is a bit of the confluence of social media and just information moving faster than ever, especially unofficial information, kind of just getting passed around and shared without any official word. So yeah, I think it's several things here.
Lance?
Yeah, I'm going to just jump on that. I agree with the being human part and wanting to find patterns and connections and making, weaving a thread, weaving threads, like making them all connect. And that's just the way the brain works, right? Like we love puzzles for the most part. People like to have answers to things and they don't like having things that are open-ended. So that I do agree with, but I wanted to add on, there's the classic morbid curiosity of these things. People love scary movies. They love horror movies. They love the thrill of the hunt. They love the idea of a bad guy out there and the idea of catching the bad guy and telling that story and telling the story to, their families and friends when they're so far removed from it, when it's not something that is happening directly to, them, to their family or anything like that. The morbid curiosity. And hey, I will be one of the first to say, like, I have that morbid curiosity and I will slow down if there's a crash on the other side of the highway. And I don't want this to, be something that it's not anything like I'm super proud of, but it's just a natural thing. I think most people have that, and it goes with this too. And I've told a quick anecdote about this. My barber asked me when I got my haircut if we were covering this, and he's like, why do I want there to be a serial killer?
Right.
I think that just is something that a lot of people kind of wrestle with. But hey, it is a story, and people want a conclusion to a story.
I did look into a little research around this, and I found one interesting point that really stuck out to me, and that was desire for order and chaos. That basically by doing this, it turns it into something that's more manageable for us to process and believe in, that, oh, it's just one crazy person that's responsible for all of these terrible things that are going on. Like that is easier for us to digest than these are all individual instances. There's a bunch of crazy people out there. There's people that might have done this to themselves. Yeah, it's more frightening to think that humanity is as wild as it actually is. Morph, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. And I think also in this day of crowd sleuthing and crowd solving, which I think is a good thing overall, I think you can get on a forum and talk with 100 people, and these 2 or 3 people say, well, we've got these cases, and 2 or 3 other ones say, well, what about this case here? And all of a sudden they start getting connected when, the closest connection between them is that it's the New England region and really nothing more than that.
Right, right. Yeah, it reminds me of a certain author of a missing series that picks a particular locale and then just talks about the crazy trend in that locale because everyone goes missing there. It's like, well, when you go looking at that locale for missing cases, you're going to see that trend. And that's why right off the top of this, as soon as I showed the map, I'm like, keep in mind, this is showing these cases that have been lumped together in this way. Well, guys, I think... Go ahead.
I have one more quick thing. I mean,
Yeah.
you just mentioned that author, and it made me think of this. When you Google New England serial killer and you go to Google Images, you don't even have to scroll very long before you find. I love her, Nancy Grace. I do. I think she is a powerhouse in her industry. I respect her a lot. But there's a thumbnail of her, and it shows like the New England area in a map, and she's looking all concerned, and it says "Terror in New England."
Right.
The media is driving a lot of it. Is I think what
terror
you're getting
in New England. Terror.
Yeah.
And I have one more thing too, and I could be wrong, but I'm willing to bet that if you looked right now at any part of the country, Florida, Texas, California, you might be able to find a similar group of cluster of deaths that you could put together the same way we're doing here, that just haven't been talked about, and maybe one day they will be all connected on a message board someplace.
Yeah, well, don't put that information out there, Morph, because now some guy is going to want attention on Facebook, and you just gave him the formula. Like that's
don't
literally
blame me.
It's all you have to do is put together a grouping like this. Because I've seen
Morph gave him the formula.
Morph gave him the formula. Tim, any last comments?
No, I'm just kind of sick of Morph mentioning Florida when it's like 50 degrees up here in New England right now.
That's
but I'm wearing a sweatshirt. It's cold inside my studio here, so I am cold.
Oh,
he does throw it around a lot. We know you're in Florida, Morph. We get it.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm freezing in Minnesota.
between
guys,
the weather and the terror I feel up here.
I really appreciate you guys joining us today and helping out with this episode of Brain Scratch. Where can people find your work? Let's start with Morph.
Head over to my website, abjackentertainment.com, and you can find all of my different podcasts under one platform. I also host Criminology. That's my longest well-known podcast. And you can find me on, my handle on X, where I do a lot of posting, is @TrueCrimeGuy.
All right. And Crawlspace, since you guys share a brain, I'll let you both answer at the same time. Where can people find you?
A brand he meant. He didn't mean a brain.
That's debatable. We do the Missing podcast and Crawlspace podcast. You can find them both on your favorite podcatcher, but you can also check us out at crawlspace-media.com on our website, and we're out there on social media as well.
And our OnlyFans is also at Crawlspace.
That is not real, is it?
No.
Okay, good. You worried me for a second. Yeah.
You mentioned chaos, and that's just where my brain went.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Well, thank you guys for joining me here today, and thank you for hanging out with us. I hope it gave you some more insight, some more to think about this theory. And like I said before, if you want to try to get to a better level of understanding with it, the best thing you can do is dive into the research for yourself. Remain, I don't want to say skeptical, critical. Keep a critical mindset on when you're looking at this kind of thing. And yes, keep in mind that the public is more and more wired for trying to grab your attention. With every year that passes, with social media being that much more normal and people being born into a world where that's the norm, this is a never-ending ramp that we're on when it comes to people seeking attention. If they could pull together a bunch of cases and turn it into a post and that gets a click from you, that's what we're fighting against in terms of trying to share information and just remind people to be more respectful with these cases, and to be helpful with these cases as well. Why does liking some posts necessarily, is that really being helpful to the case or not? That's the question you should be asking about the media that you're looking at. Are the content creators that you're watching, are they interfacing with these families? Are they making donations to the organizations that help these families, directly to the families themselves? Ask those questions, and I think you'll wind up in a bit of a better place.